the building. Hi, hello. What's up? Yeah, over here. I'm a teacher. I know we just came out of the education panel. I should do one of these 5, 4. All eyes up front. Okay. No, I don't want to take too much time because this is an awesome panel we have assembled. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce today's moderator for our Move This Campaigns at Work session. She is the co-founder of the blog Thick Dumpling Skin. She's also the former publisher of Hyphen Magazine, and she works at Facebook, so if you have any issues with, timeline or your profile page, see Lisa after the panel. Ladies and gentlemen, Lisa Lewis.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for being here today and for joining us for our panel. So the way I'd like to get started is by telling you that Jeff put his revenge on me by putting me on this panel because I had a lot of, the reason why I'm moderating this panel specifically is because I had a lot of questions for him when we were talking about this idea. I was like, I don't know, everybody's so interested in social media and, sometimes I just don't know if it actually works. Everybody wants to talk about it, and this is terrible because I work at Facebook and this is being filmed right now. I'm really sorry, Facebook. I am speaking on behalf of myself today, not as an employee at Facebook. Okay, anyway, it's still making me nervous. But anyway, so this is kind of how I want to structure the panel because I have a lot of questions and I would love to take questions from you guys at the end and really make it very conversational because I just have a lot of questions. So I'm going to get started by letting our panelists introduce themselves. And as Tracy suggested, I'm going to cap them at 3 sentences each. No, I'm just joking. You guys have to all sing about what you do. Why don't you guys... so why don't we start with Michael and just, in a few sentences, let us know, what organization or what affiliations you're with. Why you're qualified to be on the panel today, and whether or not you want to give me $50 after this panel.
All right, I'm Michael Lee. I work with racebending.com as the media liaison. If you're not familiar with racebending, we were the primary drivers behind the Last Airbender whitewashing campaign. Not to promote the whitewashing because we were really angry about it. And since then, we've gone on to other projects like Akira, All You Need Is Kill, and smaller projects like Power Rangers. The co-founder, Marissa Lee, couldn't be here today, so I stepped in, and I'm actually kind of bummed because this would have been an all-female panel without me. I just realized that...
No, you're not diversifying the panel, it's okay. We need your voice in here. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Cynthia Brothers and I'm with 18 Million Rising. I'm the editor and strategist and we're the first and only national APIA online organizing group. So we've done campaigns around API voter engagement leading up to the elections and some other ones around racist Google apps in response to Joel Brinkley. I also am the blog editor for Hyphen. I have my own blog by Coastal Bitchin', and as a side project, I have the Yellow Peril Dildo, but that's a whole nother feasibility show.
What? Dildo what?
Hi, I'm Eileen Chow, and I'm probably here because I went to college with Jeff, but...
When Jeff says come, we just all show up.
Precisely,
really.
precisely. But I run a media research institute in Taiwan, and when I'm in the US, I'm teaching at Duke, and I teach Asian American narratives, pop culture, but probably specifically for this panel, been very involved with the students who reacted to the Duke frat party incident, and we're trying to make something really exciting happen as a result of racism.
Hi, I'm Tracy Kantapidiyanda, and I'm an artist in the community. I'm here today, though, to talk more about 2 projects, Tuesday Night Cafe and the Tuesday Night Project, and a very baby project called Generations of War. Neither of these projects actually really are social media projects. They're like organizing in real life space, physical space. So I'm excited to be here. I'm not sure what my qualifications are based on.
Oh, you have a lot. You have a lot. Okay, So, welcome to our esteemed panelists. So I guess my first question, I'll just give you a little bit more context. So I was the former publisher of Hyphen magazine for a couple of years. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Hyphen. Yay! All right, I love this audience. Sometimes when I go to college, they're like, what is that? Which makes me feel really, really old. But, so I remember when I first started out at Hyphen, we would blog and we would write about some, really kind of, am I allowed to cuss in here? Like, okay.
Sure. Yes.
Okay, so there would be some really fucked up shit that happens, right? And we would write about these things, and then I would go to the editor-in-chief. I'd be like, so I know we just wrote about this, but like, what happens after that? And I know Hyphen is a little bit different. Hyphen is, a journalistic entity, and there's like the firewall between like journalism and actual whatever. But I was really sort of confused. I was like, okay, so we write about it, and then like, does that just end? Like, what happens after that? And I think I was always sort of, eventually I understood like what our role is in terms of like being a media entity, right? Our role is to write about these things and put them out there and try to be as neutral as possible. But we all know that's not true. So we try to be as neutral as possible, and we put these things out there so that other people can take it and decide whether or not they want to go the next step with it. And then we started seeing the rise of social media, which I think sort of closed that gap a little bit. It wasn't just, you didn't have that limitation of like, well, this is like a journalism, like this is a newspaper, you can't whatever, do the next step of taking action or going, protesting, like that's just not appropriate, etc. So we saw the rise of social media, but for a while, I think I didn't see as much of that. Like we started seeing a lot of the rise of like Asian American bloggers, and a lot of people just like online sort of talking about things, but in terms of it actually like translating to action, I didn't see a whole lot of that. So my first question to you guys is, I think some of you have definitely changed that, in terms of the way that you've been organizing. Was there kind of like a turning point where you were like, oh, social media is a really powerful like mechanism to do that? Like, was there ever something that happened that got you guys sort of taking the organizing onto social media? And go.
All right, so actually during lunch, Eileen and I were talking about, quote unquote slacktivism and how effective is it? Does it translate into anything concrete and solid to kind of accomplish it that you can point to and say, yes, that retweet definitely made a difference. I'm fighting for a cause here. And with race bending, we're like 99% slacktivists. There's 4 of us who are actually volunteering as part of the core group, and everything else is on Facebook and on Twitter, and then randomly when some print media company decides to interview us about a topic. And what we found was very powerful for us about social media was the ability to get the attention of traditional media. So we can point to our followers on Facebook, and to someone who doesn't understand Facebook, we can say, yeah, we have 10,000 followers on our page, and they go, wow, that's quite a lot. You guys have quite the following online.
That's a lot. That is. It's true.
It's declined somewhat since Airbender. But what we did that I found to be very effective was we had a passionate base that was very angry about this issue, and we would post an article about it that someone else had written. And it would be a movie review or a preview or whatever. And we would just tell people, go to the comment section and tell them that you're upset about the casting and do it in a rational way. So it was interesting because through social media, we were trying to actually teach people who really aren't activists. They're just mostly angry anime fans about how to talk intelligently about race and gender and the intersections with casting and media portrayals. And somehow we did a decent job, I would say, because you would go to any random, you could basically go to almost any random article on the internet about The Last Airbender, and in the comment section, there would be 50 comments from people being fairly eloquent about why it was a problem. And the people who wrote those articles would see that, And so it was this weird way of getting social media to grab the attention of traditional media writers and producers and then get us kind of competing time in the same space. So if you read 3 Inches on a Prince piece about Airbender, you would very likely see something about casting controversy because we exploded it on the internet. And so I don't know if that is what you were asking about, but okay.
I mean, but do you feel like, and this is obviously questions for everybody, but so do we feel like traditional media still holds the power of influence?
For my part, I think that it's frustrating because social media is this rising entity that we want to be the source of information, that we want us to be the source of conversation at a national level. Because especially for Asian Americans, that lowers so many existing institutional barriers to getting our voices heard in traditional media. But most people will still tune into CNN, they'll still tune into Fox News, unfortunately, and all of these, they'll read the Sunday newspaper. So it still has an effect, I would say.
So to relate to what Michael was saying and also provide a concrete example, linking it back to Hyphen. So I don't know if y'all heard about the Radio Lab Yellow Rain controversy that happened a few months ago. But basically, this NPR show, Radio Lab, invited a Hmong woman and her uncle to come on and talk about what they thought would be the effects of chemical warfare and genocide and the Hmong experience. So what it really turned out to be is that they were trying to say that through science, they had proven that this yellow rain was actually bee shit. And was kind of reinforcing the trauma that the Hmong community had experienced. So this story, one of the first places it broke was on Hyphen, and that Hyphen invited Kalia Yang to write an article. And so a lot of people took notice. They were, really pissed off about it. They were fired up. They were tweeting to Radio Lab on the NPR page. And then to move people's anger into action, 18 Million Rising started a petition. And the way that this petition was, housed was online. It was on our website. It was spread through folks, social media. And I think that this was able to get the attention of, the folks in Radio Lab who were like, oh shit, we fucked up. We're gonna have to, try to have a meeting with them. And basically it raised the visibility of, the Hmong community and how do you address cultural competency and be accountable to the communities that you are profiling in the media. So, I definitely think that the power of social media can get the attention of traditional media, and also it's just where people are likely to act in a very to mobilize in a rapid way.
Interesting. So first I thought I'd just directly respond to Lisa's question. I give you 2 examples about traditional media. It's funny, I'm kind of a media historian, and so one of the ways in which media was conceived of in a newspaper is that the world is infinite for the first time, right? Because you wrote about world news. And that was a new idea, but that the confines of the paper, the physical page, confine how much you could write. And of course, we're exactly in the opposite situation, which is you can write endlessly, right? Because you have infinite space on blogs and any kind of social media, but that what you don't have is necessarily a broad reach. Not everyone has the kind of same reach that traditional media has. So you go from large public, finite space, you get to infinite space, but finite publics. Because the question is how to kind of mobilize or transform that gap. But I just wanted to give 2 examples, and probably not quite here, and they're fairly bifurcated, but I like to think of them as connected, just like these are 2 parts of my career. But a simple way of saying social media works is that I guess everybody here may have probably heard about the whole Duke frat party, Kappa Sigma scandal, people dressing up as geishas, blah, 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 and then there was a protest on campus, and it's actually led to a lot of campus activism that's expedited certain other longer-term projects. The simple answer is that 2002, Asian American Studies was, people trying to push toward a major or a minor or anything. 2002, it died. And actually 2 years ago, the same frat 2 years ago had Asia Prime Party, but nobody's heard of it, right? So, but this time, the party happened, partiers were posted on Facebook, then in a very old school Xeroxing way, then their flyers were made of the partiers with faces blocked out, and then it was papered over campus. It was taken down immediately by the frat, but then that itself was documented, right, over social media. So I guess what I'm saying is, so the same identical thing happened 2 years ago and nobody cared, right? And now it becomes national news. So you do see the way in which social media does play a kind of really role. One is also feeding kind of narrative to traditional media, which is what happened. And also back to the notion in 2002 being the failed attempt to get Asian American Studies on Duke campus. Well, I'm now chairing the board that is bringing Asian American Studies to Duke campus, and the administration is quite eager to cooperate because they know that whatever they say, what they do or don't do, more importantly, will be immediately disseminated. And I think that there's something really interesting about social media advocacy that happens. In a very, very different example, other end of the scale is I mentioned I work in media in Taiwan, and that is actually traditional media. We publish a newspaper in 5 different languages, Thai, Cambodian, Vietnamese, Tagalog, and Indonesian. And for migrant women who are mostly labor domestics, Southeast Asian domestics, or marriage migrants who live in Taiwan and who are working class or worse, and don't have any kind of form and certainly no internet access, right? And so they send in their submissions on the backs of 7-Eleven flyers and on old calendar pages. And so this is like old media. But it gets published and then it gets read, and the first anthology that resulted from this was published in Vietnamese called Hero. And so many of these women that took these books back to Vietnam to show that they had been published. So they were considered like subliterate, non-Chinese speaking, working class in Taiwan, subaltern, and then they now are published authors. And so I feel like that's a kind of old media mode. But I just want to make that connection and say that this paper was actually founded by Lucy Chang, who started Asian American Studies at UCLA. And so she actually brought her Chinatown activism from LA Chinatown to Taiwan, and did the model of sort of publishing community newspapers. So I guess what I'm saying is, one is traditional media has a role, right? It has a role for a lot of people who don't have internet access. And so that's really important to remember. And secondly, that I think we spent a whole day talking about Asian American stereotypes, and one thing I keep on tweeting about all day is nobody's talking about class enough, right? And nobody's talking about how this is really a kind of, when we're sitting around talking about stereotypes, we're talking about middle class stereotypes. We're not, and not all Asians are seen as smart and geeky, right? I mean, if you're a working class labor migrant, nobody calls you smart and geeky. And so I think that's a corrective to be made. Maybe we can start doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So from the three of you guys, it sounds like, social media is a really great way to help capitalize emotions, like really strong emotions, but you definitely need some strategy behind how do you sort of navigate that emotion and try to steer people in a certain direction. And I'd love to hear from you, Tracy, in terms of, I think, you mentioned that your situation is a little bit different, where it's like things were created and then you guys took it to social media to try and take it to the next level. Can you talk a little bit about the strategy or the thinking behind how you guys wanted to really leverage social media to get what you guys wanted?
Okay. I think a similarity, first of all, that I do draw with all of our projects in terms of your question about what's next is intention is everything. Because I think that we all it seems like we're all doing people-focused programming, right? We're investing in our time around community building through these different platforms, whether it's physical space or online space, and how do we then take it to the next level altogether. Tuesday Night Project started in February of 1999, 15 years ago. So, social media happened to us later, yeah? And definitely to me and my brain later. So, and it's a physical space. It's a card that I think we passed out to all of you here. And it's right here in Little Tokyo. And so its intention is to bring together in physical space around art and be able to give people accessible ways to engage in community initiatives, campaigns, learn more about all these amazing things that are going on that people can further their involvement in. So when we started to realize, man, it was much later, you know, 2005 or 6, or somewhere around there, where the idea came from inside the Corps, hey, why don't we do a live broadcast? And I don't even know what it was at that time. I don't think it was Ustream. It was whatever we did through the website so that people could watch online. And the idea was, oh yeah, you know, we can utilize social media and you know, get out our show, and different people from different places and different cities can watch if they can't make it all the way out to Little Tokyo. But as we kept putting a lot of emphasis on these new ways of getting out what we do in the work, there was a lot of discussion about being really intentional on our intention, being really clear about our intention to utilize these things to get people together in physical, real life space. I come from, I guess, old school organizing, revolutionary politics, and Asian American studies, where the focus is on, at the end of the day, mass organizing is about one relationship at a time, building one relationship at a time. And so, and I feel like we probably have experienced the fact that in growing these projects, it's been one relationship at a time in order to build not only interest from the outside world, but even people to maintain the capacity of the project, right? So, yeah.
That's a good question. Yeah, no, you totally did it. Okay. I was like so captivated. I want you to keep going. Man, okay. So I want to talk more specifically then about strategy, right? So I think there's probably, you know, I hope there are people in the audience where they're like, well, you know, how exactly do I take something and make it move from social media? And I think there's also the question of like picking your battles too, because there's like just fucked up shit going on like all day, like every day, you know? So, you know, I guess from our panelists, like I would love to hear, you know, sort of like, if one, whether or not you found yourself having to pick those battles, right? What do you pick as like the thing that you can really like leverage? And then two, maybe give examples of, so for Mike, for example, it sounded like you guys kind of stumbled on this strategy where it's like, there's a lot of people like talking, then it got picked up by media, then it was like, oh wait, maybe that's kind of like a strategy for us. Like, how do we then sort of blast to all the traditional media, right? Whatever. So talking more specifically about like, for the people in this room who are interested in kind of, you know, stopping the selectivism and kind of like moving to that next level.
Well, I think with race bending, we were kind of fortunate because there was this pre-existing reservoir of passion around this television series, around Avatar: The Last Airbender. So there's all these people who were intense fans of this television show, this kids show, and fans of all ages, who heard about the movie, who heard about the casting, and for a lot of them it was their first interaction with the idea that, hey, we aren't really a perfect post-racial society. It was their first it was like almost a moment of awakening for a lot of our followers, because these are people who are, by and large, having met a lot of the people who ended up following race bending, by and large they were not people who were politically active, who were socially active, who were conscious in that way. So through social media, I guess, it's challenging without, to actually answer your question, I would say that the biggest challenge is finding that reservoir of passion and finding your fan base. And we can talk about Twitter followers or likes on a Facebook page, but if you don't have a good understanding of who is actually going to follow your issue, who is going to be on the ground, willing to at least speak up and talk about your issue, who is willing to spread the kind of memes and concepts of your campaign to their friends and to their family, and eventually even for us to news outlets and blogs and other places where they could voice their comments online, then it's pointless. It's pointless to accumulate followers without an understanding of their passion, how to tap into that passion, how to align that passion with what you're trying to accomplish.
Cynthia?
Yeah, I agree that at 18 Million Rising we constantly get bombarded with there's so much.
Right, like what about this? What about that?
happening, and how do we pick our battles, and how do we walk that line between, I mean, we can go on the defensive and be reactionary all the time, but how do we also do things that are proactive, or that we celebrate when we have wins? So you may see things like Cloud Atlas or Yellowface in Hollywood. But then you also had a record number of APAs that were elected to Congress last year. And sometimes people want to celebrate that. You know, they might want to spread a meme that's like, yay, go us, you know, we rock. And then when we are picking the campaigns that we are speaking up and saying this is problematic, I think there's several factors that go into it. Can we provide clear, accessible analysis about why something is problematic? Can we do that in a creative way that's easy for people to understand and sign on to? And probably the most concrete example I can give of that is there were a series of apps called Make Me Asian and Make Me Indian that were offered on Google. Actually, pull it up.
Cynthia gets a prize today for being the most prepared panelist here.
So this was offered on Google Play, which is the biggest provider to your users. And as you can see, it allows a user to overlay a bunch of racist stuff on their picture, you know, pretty ridiculous. So this is a good example of something we like to call creative counter-trolling. So what's kind of a creative way that we can illustrate how this is messed up. And we asked what happens when we put the app Make Me Asian on famous Asians. So we put it on Mindy Kaling and on George Takei, and as you can see, it's pretty ridiculous. So illustrating why it's problematic, and then taking people's understanding and channeling it into an action. In this case, it was a petition directed towards Google to take both of these apps down. And this got a lot of media hits on CNN and NPR. We got over 10,000 signatures combined with the petition on change.org, and eventually Google Play took down these apps and deleted the profile of the developer. So it was successful in that sense, but I think we had to be strategic about, you can just look at this and see that that just doesn't look right. Right? So.
In answer to Lisa's great question, I mean, basically I think, and Michael and I were talking about this all through lunch, but...
you guys get a prize for being prepared too.
Yeah.
And Tracy for emailing me at 2 in the morning and texting me. Everybody gets a prize.
We were doing people-focused organizing.
Right.
But I think we both felt that fundraising is really effective. Actually, we're talking about like the Komen, the anti-Komen backlash, or kind of like anti-Rush, or that it's Kickstarter campaigns, and so fundraising is excellent. Raising initial interest is really effective on social media, and also emotional ploys, or playing to somebody's emotions to get them interested, is really effective on social media. You give them visuals, you show them the Asians in the library YouTube. I mean, there are ways in which, and like with the Duke thing, people react immediately because they could see it and they could see it immediately. And so that's where it's really effective. What is not effective is what you guys talked about, especially Michael talked about, is sustaining. And that is where what Tracy's saying is brilliant and important, which is all great activism is one-to-one, people-focused, and on the ground. And I've actually done a lot of work for the Obama campaign, and one of the ways they really strategize well, of course, is both use social media as a way of getting initial interest, while their fundraising and their getting out the vote is knocking on neighbors' doors. And so it's that really interesting combination of grassroots with social media is, I think, what leads to success. You can't have one without the other.
And then for Tracy, you talked specifically, I think you guys had that goal, right? How do you bring people together? The goal is, how do you make Tuesday Night Cafe as accessible as possible? So with that goal in mind, can you talk specifically about some of the strategies that you guys took on?
Well, as I was listening to all the examples, I thought these were really clear, especially Cynthia's example of that entire campaign and that trajectory of multi-platform work. So, if I can, I would like to actually talk a little bit about the other project.
Oh yes, okay. Absolutely.
To give an example, so Generations of War conversely from the Tuesday Night Project is a really new project. And I feel like, again, taking into consideration that these are not my jobs, they're like my volunteer time, I guess, my outside time. And so I feel like I ran out of the asks for this new initiative that I wanted to work on. And I was speaking in Glenn Omatsu's class, an amazing professor, Glenn Omatsu at UCLA, PCC, and CSUN. And I was at PCC and just talking about some of the caveats of, starting a new thing, trying to document specifically at this moment, in this phase, oral history documentation of third-generation Japanese American Vietnam War vets who are anti-war activists. So we had very little funding at the time. I think it was just several $100s from a professor. And Glenn said, hey, he's the one that came up with this really great multi-platform sort of approach, in that he said, let's work together with students out of UCLA. We don't have the capacity to do it at PCC or CSUN, but let's leverage, well, he didn't use that word. He said, let's work with these students. And I feel like that was great leveraging. And leverage harder. I learned that from the Astor Gates. Check him out. Anyway, so, so thinking about all the ways in which we can build resources, right? And get something done. So I didn't do anything, really. It really was him and 75 students from UCLA in an Asian American Social Movements course that then took the project and went and split up the entire class into groups that interviewed the 5 different veterans. They came up with the idea to create comic books. Glenn came up with the idea to not just have essays from the veterans, but get 75 accounts from each of these students on their relationship to war and peace issues, right? So I thought, wow, that is fantastic, building upon certain relationships to work with a greater mass of people to get something done. And then by the process, I'm wordy today, excuse me, by the process of doing it, it was a community organizing experience. Those 70, 75 students didn't know anything, not even just about Asian Americans as soldiers, they didn't really know anything about Vietnam, right? Most of us don't. I don't really know much. June Rita here knows a lot more. She's done performances and character work on all of that. And so I feel like that's one example of how to do that. With TMP, with Tuesday Night Cafe, I think it's been one event, one relationship, one core structure, coming in to work with the group, learning how to make it fluid. It's a grassroots project. A lot of people think that they can come get a job with us, and they can't. That's not my intention. I don't want to run an organization like that. I will say this, we deliberately do not approach this as a nonprofit organization that is going to require us to raise money, like hundreds of thousands of dollars to maintain a staff. And kudos to everybody that does that. That's crazy. Okay. But for me, I feel like I want to make it accessible for myself in my life, as well as other people in the community who just want to come and get involved in something and have an entry point. So creating entry points, I feel like, I would love to attend a race bending symposium. I would love to read the annual report from 18 Million Rising. What if Hyphen took the major issues of the last 5 years and then built individual, smaller programs? I would go, you know what I mean? And TMP would help promote that. So, yeah. I guess in a couple words, multi-platform, and networking the networks, so that we're not always rebuilding the wheel. I need to learn a lot more about the folks on this very panel and what they're doing and how we can network our networks.
So in conclusion, and this is my conclusion, to wrap it up before I open up to questions, it sounds like, again, this is probably not news to any of you, but social media is a tool, and it should be seen as a tool and a platform, but without that intention, right, and without, that thinking of where do we take it from here, it basically is kind of like wasted energy. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
No, Cynthia, is still thinking. She's like looking.
I'm still thinking about what Tracy said.
Okay. Okay, you guys think of that. That's kind of my conclusion. If there's a takeaway for today, for this panel, I want to sort of emphasize that, again, like social media is a great tool, but it might not be the answer to everything, you know? I think I've given a lot of workshops in the last couple of years where people are like, social media is this new buzz, this new hype thing, how do we get on it? And it's it might not make sense for what you're doing. And if you do want to do it, it takes a lot of energy and thought, and it definitely takes strategy in order for you to go where you want to. And that's always a hard question. It's what do I want to do? How do I want to harness all of this energy after I get everybody riled up, I think.
If I could just add one thing, I think netroots and grassroots basically have to come together. There's no such thing as, doing one without the other. But I feel a little bit like the downer of the day, but I did want to say that one thing we talked about over lunch was, because social media is so effective, the bullied bus driver lady who ended up getting so much sympathy and it was great, that. But we were saying that some things like race bender, because people are devoted to Avatar and they love On, and so there is this huge energy for it. But we were saying how Danny Chan was a case that just kind of should have gotten more attention. And also the Supreme Court is about to face the biggest decision about affirmative action in the coming weeks. Nobody's talking about it. Somehow it's not social media sexy. And so the question is, how do we kind of get around the social media sexy problem, with campaigns?
Yeah, and I think that's actually something that 18 Million Rising has done relatively well. So I definitely encourage you guys to check them out. How do you, again, make racism accessible to people who just might not get it? Really, that's what it's coming down to, right? How do you unpack affirmative action in 140 characters, right? Okay, so I'm gonna open it up to questions. Yeah.
My name is Dan Mayetta. I'm co-chair of the Asian Pacific American Media Coalition, which is an umbrella that consists of national civil rights groups and media activism groups. And I want to comment on the last comment about maybe social media isn't necessarily the answer to every racist problem that might arise. With an example, some of you know that Jay Leno has told in the past jokes about Asians eating dogs. It seems to be one of his favorite things that he does. And this has been going on for a long time, so many people have tried to write letters, have insist on meetings and so forth. And as part of the coalition, we regularly meet with the network presidents and the creative people, and we've managed meetings with Jay Leno. Recently we had a telephone conference with him and his producer, and he explained the problem, and he said, he'll take it under advisement. But then a few months after that, he told another one. So we thought, how are we going to respond to that? Should we use social media? Should we do a petition and all that? And we decided what would happen likely is that he has got millions of followers, millions of fans. A lot of people would then write in and say, lighten up, get a clue, and so forth. So we decided instead just to go after their advertisers. So we contacted a lot of advertising agencies, a lot of advertisers. They wrote letters to the network president. The network president talked to Jay, and we've now been assured that Jay will stop doing those dog-eating jokes. So social media certainly has a place in many different contexts, but it's not necessarily the best way to go in every situation.
Yeah, thank you for that comment.
I'd also say that social media is especially important for our folks because we're underrepresented in traditional media. And one of the reasons that 18MR came to be about is because we have the highest online usage rates. So this is one of the tools in our arsenal to fight back against that mainstream discourse. And I agree that it's only as effective as how does that change what we see in our everyday lives? How does that impact our ability to change policy, to change media, and change culture? So we can, be in control of our own images, our own stories, instead of people always talking about us or for us. So.
And we don't have time to talk about this today, but maybe next year. I would love to talk about this idea of public shaming on social media. It's kind of like when you hit your kids, right? No, I don't hit my kids, I don't have any kids. But when you, some parents have come to the conclusion that you don't hit your kids because it teaches them how not to get caught. But it doesn't teach them what they did was wrong. And so, you know, it's this like really interesting idea for me how like when social media works, when we sort of public shame people into apologizing or not doing certain things, does that mean they've now been sort of like educated about the issue? So that's just something that I find is interesting, particularly given, you know, what happened recently in the tech space. I don't know if any of you guys followed this, but there was a woman who went to a tech conference and public shamed one of the attendees who was telling a really sexist joke, and he ended up getting fired, she ended up getting fired, and there's just like, from their employers, and there's just so much news about, you know, did she approach it the wrong way? Should she have publicly shamed him? If she had just gone to him and said, hey dude, I'm, you know, kind of offended by the sexist joke that you told, would that have changed anything? So that's just another conversation. But other questions, I don't know how much time I have, but I'm just gonna keep asking questions until we're told to get out of here. Any other questions?
If there are no questions, I want to comment about the limits of social media, because we've kind of been asking ourselves, when is social media the right thing to do? And I think it's often extremely effective for fan bases, for media, for pop culture. And like Eileen and I were talking about, it's not that effective with kind of downer stories. Just real life news like Danny Chen and like even just voting issues. People just don't seem to care. And I think part of the problem is that the intersection and overlap between social media and our entertainment time is almost 100%. When we come onto Twitter or Facebook, we don't go on, well, okay, so I imagine most of us on the panel do go on to get informed about racial politics and issues.
I don't.
But, all right. But most people, the vast majority of users go on there to have fun, to see what their friends are talking about, to gossip, to talk about celebrities. So there's some effectiveness there when we're talking about something like being pissed off about a Google app, because this is interfering with my being happy on social media, or when we're talking about The Last Airbender, because I went on to Facebook to talk about my favorite television show, and now I find that there's white people where I was expecting Asian people. So in those cases, we see kind of a firestorm, or around YouTube videos. Someone puts a funny YouTube video, you laugh. Someone puts a YouTube video of Alexander Wallace ranting about Asians in a library, and then suddenly goes super viral. And the challenge with social media is it ever going to be seen as anything more than entertainment? Because if not, then I question how effective it can be in most campaigns that aren't centered in some way around media and
yeah, I'm optimistic. I think there is definitely, I think there's a way that we can kind of get to the hard issues. I think we just haven't figured out ways of doing that yet, which we're still trying.
I think, and actually, in that sense, I'm actually going to undown myself and say that I'm actually feel pretty positive, and like you were saying about Professor Matsu's project, and is that so many of us in the academy now, in fact, use. So all my students tweet, Tumblr, and you know, as part of their coursework, and so they see it as a public contribution to knowledge. I feel that there is this kind of sea change in the way we use this, and a lot of academics use it as a way of networking. So it becomes then integrated into our curriculum.
And I have to add too that like we're talking about social media as if it's a static thing, which it really isn't, right? Like technology is changing so fast, social media is changing so fast. In order for you to do anything successfully today in terms of the tech space or innovations or whatever, you have to do it with social in mind. So I think, you know, as time goes on, we are going to get a platform that I think has a lot more abilities for us to be able to tackle those harder issues and do it in a way that's more accessible, I think.
I'm particularly interested in hoping you can talk more about this, and anyone else in the room who has projects similar. What our various educational program components are. So I'm really curious about those, if the panelists can also talk with me or talk with all of us right now about that. I'm curious, what are some educational components? And then I put that out there to everybody in the room. We all have powers as educators, and we can see ourselves as that in different ways. Is there a show of hands for the folks who consider themselves teachers, educators, facilitators, moderators? program people, students,
Everybody.
yeah, former students. You know, because I feel like I'll throw an old school term out there, self-determination. And I'll bring up a very much younger project, Immediate Justice. Tani Ikeda runs that with a bunch of folks. And they have gone into many other communities to utilize different forms of social media to teach young girls how to make films on their tablets and things. And so she utilizes resources that she obtains through heavy amounts of fundraising, but to get that kind of access into the hands of folks that can mold their own realities through media.
Oh, while we're doing plugs, I should mention that Ada Camp, San Francisco this summer, is Ada, named after Ada Lovelace, is a camp for young women to learn how to use open source technology. And so it's a tech training for young women.
I have a plug too.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
And also just to go back to what Tracy said earlier about networks upon networks. I think a vision that ATMR has going forward is to cultivate this online space for progressive APAs to come together and to bring all of their networks, both personal and professional, in a way that complements what happens in real life, and to enable us online organizing. And just think about all of the intelligence and connections and skills that we all bring to the table. What are the implications for us politically and socially when those start to intersect? So, I mean, you guys are the movement. ATMR is just the vehicle and the platform and the technology tool. So it really takes y'all to make it happen. And so we're looking for folks to help us do this. We're looking for folks for a content team. So if you're like a social media or a culture or social justice junkie and you want to help find and curate and distribute content, please come talk to me, because we'd love to add folks to our team.
And I think Mike touched on your question earlier in terms of the educational component, right? I mean, that was your strategy in terms of you wanted to go out and help educate people using what had happened.
Yeah, especially for something like a popular film where most of the people you're talking to are just cinema or television fans. No one in that group has any kind of academic background in ethnic studies, in gender studies, in any kind of political science. So just teaching them the terminology and the whole concept of how there can be this entire institution in Hollywood that's racist and that's discriminatory, and explaining how you can separate that from individual action. And these are very complex ideas that we really struggled early on to condense in a way that people could understand, especially fans of the television series who were upset at us because the flip side of having that pre-existing reservoir of passion for the show was there was a pre-existing reservoir of passion for the show, and they all hated us because we were against this live-action adaptation of their film.
And I actually want to just give one example before I take the last question. I think all of us have the opportunity to educate, like every day in our own lives, right? You don't necessarily have to be a licensed teacher. And I think what is really powerful about social media is that it helps us to target the people that we educate. Like, I'm not gonna go on YouTube and try to write in a comment and try to like educate trolls, right? That's just ineffective. But what has happened recently to me, which I thought was really interesting, was I was at the airport and I was reading a magazine and I took a picture of, it's a mainstream fashion lifestyle woman magazine, and there was a woman who, the caption was like, I like to do this because it really plays up my almond-shaped, delicate eyes. And I was like, are you serious? Did she really say this about herself? So I took a picture of that and I wrote that. And I actually had coworkers who were like, well, what's wrong with her describing her eyes as almond-shaped, right? And during that instance, like, you have to sort of take the side of like what people don't know, they just don't know. And you can't just be like, oh, you're fucking racist, what? That's really an opportunity for you to explain what exactly about that is problematic. And I think there are opportunities for us to do that every day, and social media really helps us to have those kinds of conversations with the right people, I think. Okay, I'm gonna take one last question before Keith kills me. Yeah.
You know, it's curious. I mean, it strikes me that not only we as Asian Americans, there are these issues that we're dealing with, but that there's similar issues for other, minority communities, people of color, and it strikes me that entrenched racism is such a big problem that somehow we need to work with people in the African American community, the Latino community, to be able to come together, maybe even in the white community too. I wonder if somehow a lot of things have kind of their own piece, and if somehow we're able to do something more meta, somehow maybe can go even farther. I don't know. Maybe that's kind of my dream. It's part of it.
Can I jump in on that, Eugene? Actually, one of the really interesting things about the Duke frat party and the backlash is the people who immediately supported were not actually other Asian American students who were a little ambivalent, not sure if they should stand out. It was the Black Student Association, Latino students. It was exactly like Michael said, people who were comfortable with thinking about these issues, not people who are Asian or not Asian, or Asian American or not Asian American. So the cliche of social media is that we are not alone. You can be a brony, and there are other bronies out there, right? So, but the point is that racist incidents happen at frat parties every week probably. But what was really interesting is the way where nationally, actually a lot of your 18 million right too, brought different student groups together. So we constantly get voices of support from all around the world, actually, but from other parts of the U.S. and not actually Asian American groups, just.
And I think that's something that we can all do better in terms of like when thinking about our own campaigns. Like, you don't have to just target Asian Americans. There are other people that you can reach out to. I was at South by Southwest a couple of weeks ago, and I remember sitting in on a panel discussion about Django Unchained, and I just kept thinking to myself, wow, like all of these things that people were saying are so relevant to Asian Americans. Like the fact that your story is not yours to tell, and all of this stuff, and Hollywood's obsession with like the struggles of like people of color and etc. I wish I had made that connection a lot earlier of like how we can all come together as a community and tackle some of these issues. So I think the onus is definitely on us to not just get to where we want to go, but also be as inclusive in the process as possible. So.
Yeah, it strikes me too that one of the implications, and I appreciate a lot of what Eileen said in terms of class needs to be a part of the discussion too, is that a lot of us Asian Americans who are talking about these issues are coming from a middle class perspective. And so if we want other communities to care about our issues, then we have to care about what happens to the African American community, the Latino community. And a lot of those things a lot of those issues are steeped in economic difficulties and entrenched economic cycles and stuff.
So this is a small anecdote, but it kind of intersects between what we've been talking about with social media as well as the question about cross-community collaboration. Someone posted on Facebook about this Kickstarter for an indie shonen manga. So it's basically a couple of young white men decided that they wanted to write a manga, and they called it Shaniqua no Ho, and it was about a biracial, half black, half Japanese girl who wanted to be the best hoe in the world. And I found it abhorrent, so I went onto Reddit, and there's a group there for black women, and I posted to the group just to say, I think this is really messed up, and I'd like some help reacting to this. I'm not a black woman. I'd like to understand what's happening, because I'm getting I just felt, it just seemed ridiculous. And this has a happy ending, which is that the moderators of that particular group are incredibly eloquent, and they messaged the people running the Kickstarter. And after a few messages back and forth, they took their own Kickstarter down, and they said, we hadn't realized how offensive we were being, and but now that we've had this discussion with you, it's really opened our eyes, and we're sorry. And it's almost never on the internet do you win an argument about racism. And so that was a huge, I thought that was a huge moment, even though it's a really small thing, because Their Kickstarter had only raised like $70 and probably won't go anywhere. But I just want to put that out there.
Thank you. So I'm going to end the panel now, but I do just want to do one more plug, is that immigration reform is coming up. It's a huge issue. I think it is definitely an opportunity for us to partner with the Hispanic and Latino organizations on this, and other immigrant communities as well. So I think this year we definitely have the opportunity to make that happen. Cynthia, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yes. So we're running a campaign called 18 Million Hearts with our Advancing Justice partners, including APOC here in LA. So Anthony and some other APOC folks are here, and they can, basically we have a petition that's trying to raise the visibility and the voices and the priorities of APIAs to pass fair and just immigration reform, because our voices are often ignored in the debate. So we're a couple hundred signatures away from our initial goal, so please go to 18millionrising.org or find Anthony and the other APOC folks and sign on to the petition so we can pass just immigration reform for our communities.
And other communities too. So thank you so much to our panelists. I'm going to stick around if you guys want to talk to them.